Hello and welcome to another in my series of videos on flying some of the standard aircraft in Flight Sim X. Today I'm going to take the Boeing 737-800 on a short flight from an airfield in the southwest of the UK called Exeter across to one of the Channel Island airfields on Guernsey. Guernsey is a really short runway for a Boeing 737, so that'll add a bit of extra interest into the landings phase when we get there. So I'm going to go to the flight planner and I am going to load one of the trips I've already done, Exeter to Guernsey. I'm going to select low altitude airways and also select IFR. The reason I select IFR here, and the reason I recommend it to you, is because you'll get help and directions from air traffic on how to position your aircraft prior to making the landing, and this is very useful when all you really want to do is to concentrate on how to use some of these tools and techniques such as the autopilot and the ILS and so on to be able to take off, fly and land your aircraft. So check that, give you some help on the flight, makes everything a lot easier. Click OK. Now for some reason FSX can't seem to understand that I'm already at the airport where my flying route is starting from, but I just click yes and keep it happy to move the aircraft to the departure airfield. Okay, so I'll click fly now and let's get ready to go. So here we are in the standard Boeing 737-800. What I'm going to do is press the F10 key to move to the 2D cockpit view, simply because it's easier for me to show you some of the dials and buttons and whatever that we need to use to get ourselves going. We can revert back to the 3D view once we're underway. So this is the 2D panel, and the first thing I'm going to do is to take a look at my current heading, which is 079. I'm going to dial 079 into the heading up here because it's almost always the case that air traffic will ask you to fly the runway heading when you take off. So let's dial that in first, 079. Of course, doesn't really matter here, we're not going to use it, but I'm going to dial it into the probable runway that we'll use when we get to Guernsey, which is 09. I'll show you why I think that's the case in a moment. For the indicated airspeed, I'm going to set this to 250. Same problem with the knobs here. If you go swooshing past them too far, they'll suddenly jump up in 10s, 20s or 30s rather than just single digits. So it's quite common for me to go zooming past the number I want and then to have to come back. I'm going to set the altitude initially to 4,000. I may well get instructions from air traffic to change that, but that'll do for now, and I'm not going to worry about vertical speed or anything like that. I'm going to set the flaps here by using the option on my joystick. Lower the flaps down to 15 degrees. Actually, let's go for 25 degrees. Exeter isn't a huge airfield either, and the more flap we've got, the sooner we'll be able to lift off the ground. Okay, with those details set, I'm going to take a look at the world map. And I'm going to scroll down to our destination, which is Guernsey. Click on the airport. There's the airport there. Click OK for that. And here we can see that the runways we have are runway 9 and runway 27. So there's really only one runway in use, and it's whether we come in from the left or the right hand side of it, depending on how we approach. If I look at the weather conditions, it says the wind 003 at 10 knots, gusting to 20. Now that doesn't help us a huge deal because that's almost a straight on crosswind on the runway. But when I did the test a moment ago, it brought me in on runway 9. I'm going to assume it's the same for now, but of course I can change it en route if I want to. Things to note here, as usual, are you want to note down the identifier in this case is India Uniform Yankee or India Golf Hotel. The ILS frequencies for both of them is 108.1 and the ILS heading, which is 91 degrees for runway 09 and 271 degrees for runway 27. So take a note of those. We'll need to dial those in shortly. Okay, so that's entered those in. Let's bring up the comms panel because we want to enter in the nav details. So 108.1 is the nav information or the nav frequency required for the ILS at Guernsey. So we'll put that in there now and we'll pop it over onto the active. There we go. And then we'll put that panel away. So a few important things to look at here up on the autopilot panel. So we've set our course to 091 degrees, which is the heading of the runway at our destination. Other than that, we're really not going to use this. That's just a reminder for what the runway heading is at our destination. Here's the auto throttle, currently set to off. Over here we have the indicated airspeed, which I've dialed in at 250. Here we have the switch to work between either nav or GPS for our navigation. We'll worry about that later. Here I've set the heading to 079, which is the current runway heading, which air traffic will probably ask us to remain on after we've taken off. Here we have the altitude, which I've set to 4,000. Air traffic may well ask us to change this, and we'll do that as the time may come. And down here the flap indicator shows that I've got 25 degrees of flap set. Underneath the dials and the readouts on the autopilot panel, we have a number of buttons that would be of interest to us. First of all, there's the flight director. Over here is the speed button. We would set that as well as selecting auto throttle if we want to be able to manage the speed automatically. Over here we have the heading select, which we'll use, and I'll select now because we'll need that for when we take off. Here we have the localizer or the nav hold switch, which is currently off, and down here the approach hold switch, which we would need for landing. Here is the altitude hold, which I'll set on for now as well, and notice that's automatically engaged the vertical speed at 1,800 feet per minute. This is the autopilot switch itself. We won't switch that on, of course, until we're airborne, wheels up, and everything seems to be okay. So that's set all that information up. Let's start a conversation with the guys at air traffic. So views air traffic. Tune exit to tower and request clearance.
Tower, Boeing, November 737 X-ray, IFR to Guernsey, ready to cut.
Boeing, November 737 X-ray, cleared to Guernsey Airport is filed. Fly runway heading, climb and maintain 6,000. Departure frequency is 128.975, squawk 3613.
Boeing, November 737 X-ray, cleared to Guernsey Airport as filed. Fly runway heading, climb and maintain 6,000. Departure on 128.975, squawk 3613.
Boeing 37 X-ray, read that correct. Contact ground on 119.8.
So an awful lot of to and fro going on there. We're just basically reading back the information to confirm that we've heard her, and she's responded to let us know that our feedback's correct, and we've both got our same understanding of what the instructions are. As suspected, we're going to be asked to fly the runway heading, but we've been asked to climb to and maintain 6,000, so I'll change the altitude readouts to reflect that, and that's good. The contacting departure I'll do just by clicking down here momentarily, and the squawk 3613 will have been automatically entered by FSX for us.
Boeing, November 737 X-ray with India, ready to taxi IFR. Boeing, November 737 X-ray, taxi to and hold short of runway 8. Taxiway runway 8. Contact tower on 119.8 when ready. Taxiing hold short runway 8 via taxiway runway 8. Boeing 37 X-ray.
Okay, so we're holding short of runway 8 and we've been asked to contact the tower on 119.8 when ready. So let's do that.
Exeter Tower, Boeing, November 737 X-ray at runway 8, ready for takeoff, IFR to Guernsey.
Boeing, November 737 X-ray, cleared for takeoff, runway 8.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 8, Boeing, November 737 X-ray.
Okay, so we are ready for takeoff, ready to go. Everything's set here. All we really need to do now is to throw on the auto throttle and to press the speed option on the autopilot panel. So let's do that. And the engines will start to spool up, as you can see down here on the readout. Once they get to about 90, they'll start to move forward and pick up speed quite quickly. Now what we're doing is looking for the speed readout here. When it reaches about 150, we should pull back on the stick to raise the nose and hopefully climb into the air before we meet the end of the runway. This cross section here is a good indication to me that we need to be taking off round about now, and we haven't yet. I'm going to pull back on the stick now. We're about 150 knots. We're starting to climb. We've got a positive rate of climb indicating now, so I'll lift the gear by pressing the G key, and then I'll press the Z to engage the autopilot. Equally, I could have pressed the button there if I wanted to. We're up and we're airborne. Quick look outside the aircraft.
Boeing 37 X-ray,
And we're good.
contact Exeter departure on 128.975.
128.975 for Boeing 37 X-ray.
So raise my flaps as I'm having to work my contacts with air traffic.
Exeter departure, Boeing November 737 X-ray is climbing through 1,400 for 6,000.
Boeing, November 737 X-ray, Exeter departure, roger, altimeter 2993. Boeing 37 X-ray, turn right heading 190, proceed on course, climb and maintain 6,000. Boeing 37 X-ray, turn right heading 220, climb and maintain 6,000.
Acknowledge the instruction. While they're talking, I actually dial in the request. So 6,000 remains the same, heading 220, which we're turning on to now. And we had an altimeter reading earlier of 2993. If we look here, the PFD is showing that we're currently set to 30.03. And where we change it is up here on this button. So we want to take it down to 2993. Okay. So that's everything set nicely. There you raise the last set of flaps. So that's the flaps cleaned up and the gears up. Everything's working quite nicely. At this stage, I'm going to cycle between all the different views to get me to the 3D view. Rolling South Devon countryside. Just see position a little bit. See how I think it seems to be about right. Yes, that's a bit better. I use EasyDock, by the way.
Boeing 37 X-ray, climb and maintain 90,000.
Just follow that instruction first before I continue. Always acknowledge the instructions you get from air traffic. If you don't, they start nagging at you. and if you completely ignore them, then they'll stop giving you any assistance service as well to respond to them. So we're getting instructions already for our landing. It is a short hop to Guernsey from here.
Turn left heading 205. Expect vectors ILS. Runway 9er. Approach. Boeing 37 X-ray.
Just bring up the
Boeing 37 X-ray. Turn left heading 170.
do that first.
Turn left heading 170. Boeing 37 X-ray.
As I was saying earlier, I use EasyDock to make moving around and adjusting my position inside the cockpit much easier. It's a great piece of software for being able to do that. It's not without its limitations. But if you wondered how it is I'm doing some of the stuff I do, that's the magic for what it's worth. So I'm going to bring up the GPS. Dial range out a bit. Direction. Okay. We're coming overhead the Berry Head VOR, which is in South Devon. There's the airfield we took off from. We're coming overhead Berry Head now. We're going to go across a couple of points across the water. And there's Guernsey Airport, Guernsey Airfield, right there on the edge of the tiny island itself. So it's a very short hop, and we should be down probably within about 20 minutes or so. So what I'll do is I'll pause the video here, I'll fire it up again when we get to a more interesting point, because from this stage there's not an awful lot to see really. I'd hate for you to be bored. So you rejoin me now as we're finishing our trip across the water, and I've been asked to descend to 2000. I acknowledge the instruction.
Descend and maintain 2000. Boeing 37 X-ray.
Now my experience with this so far is that if I just descended at the standard 1,800 feet per, I wouldn't get down quick enough. So I generally take it down somewhat faster. In this case I've dialed in the vertical speed of minus 2,000.
Boeing 37 X-ray. Contact rest center on 120.15. 120.15. Boeing 37 X-ray. Guernsey approach. Boeing November 737 X-ray. Deserve 7,900 for 2,000. Boeing November 737 X-ray. Guernsey approach. Roger. Altimeter 3020.
So I need to change the barometer setting again. It fluctuates quite a bit when I fly this short journey, but you do need to change it all the time, because if you don't, you won't be flying at your requested altitudes, which means that air traffic will get just a little bit tetchy with you, and the last thing you want is for them to stop helping you as you're coming into land. So adjust the barometer setting so that when they give you a readout, like here 3020, you set it so it matches this on your flight display. Incidentally, you can bring up large versions of these flight displays just by clicking on them and send them away by clicking on them again. So you can get a bigger view of any of these once you're in the 3D view.
Boeing 37 X-ray. Turn right heading 180.
There's a lot going on there, but let's do that first. We'll go to 180. Now you might also notice now on the MFD that I've got an indication of the airfield. That's where we're heading for, and that purple, or rather magenta line there, is showing me the track I would ordinarily take straight in. I can zoom in and out on the MFD by using the options up here. So in the plus, I can zoom in or out on my map. Now where it is at the moment is just perfect for me, so I'm going to leave that alone. Notice also here on this MFD it's showing me that I am tuned in on frequency for India Uniform Yankee, which is the ILS we want, and the distance measuring equipment says I'm 22 miles away from it, so that's fine as well. But what I'm going to do at this stage now, I'm going to reduce my speed back to about 180. I don't particularly want things to come at me in a big rush as I'm coming into the landing phase, so I'll put that away. And as the beeping appears to have stopped from the ILS for the identifier, I'll put that away as well and return to the 3D view. Okay. So I've got myself sat a bit closer to the cockpit, or rather the control panel, than I intended, so let's reset that a bit. Check on the panel. I'm at about 2,000 feet here. My speed is almost 180.
X-ray, you are 21 miles west, turn left heading 120, climb and maintain 2,000, clear ILS, runway 9er approach, maintain 2,000 until established on the local end. Contact Earnsley Tower on 119.95. Turn left heading 120, climb and maintain 2,000, cleared ILS, runway 9er approach, maintain 2,000. Established. Tower on 119er. Guernsey Tower, Boeing, November 737 X-ray is 20 miles west. Inbound ILS, runway 9er approach. Boeing, November 737 X-ray, Guernsey Tower, make straight in, runway 9er. Altimeter 3016. Fly straight in, runway 9er, Boeing 37 X-ray.
So I've dialed in the parametric pressure there, 3016, so that's all set. For this display here, as well as being able to zoom in and out on the view that we're getting, I can also switch this between different modes. And for now I'm going to switch it into the approach mode, which is going to be a similar view to the one we have over here. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know that these indicators here, that diamond and this diamond down here, are showing you your horizontal position on the localizer beam to get you to the airfield, and your vertical position on the glide slope to get you to land using the ILS at the airfield. This is a similar representation over here. So as we get a bit closer, I'll set a few of these options and we should be able to make our way in quite safely for a landing using the ILS. Right now you can see that the localizer is away to our right and that we are below the glide slope. So the runway heading's at 090 degrees and I'm currently flying 120 degrees. Now as I get closer, this indicator will start to move across the front, and also this will start to move across the front as well. And when it gets into the middle section here, that is me directly positioned on the localizer beam. So I want to time my turn around to 90 degrees to intercept that. In fact, there we go. going to hit the VOR loc button here, which should automate the process of getting me correctly onto that localizer beam. I don't have to worry about the glide slope too much yet because we're still below the glide slope and that's where we need to be. So the aircraft's actually moving around left and right quite a bit here. I'm sure it would be uncomfortable if there were passengers in the back, but luckily as there aren't, it's not a big deal. Okay, as the aircraft's sorting itself out for that, I'm going to drop the gear just by tapping the G key. And once that's down and locked, I'll start lowering the flaps as well. You see the indication again on this part here. Because the runway here is so short, I'm going to deploy quite a large flap setting to keep my landing as short as possible. Up ahead I can see the red lights for the PAPI, Precision Approach Path Indicator, and I can also see my magenta diamond starting to come down now. So at this stage I'm going to engage the approach hold switch, which will now do the job of holding onto both the localizer, that's our horizontal position, and the glide slope, our vertical position.
Cleared to land, runway 9er, Boeing 37 X-ray.
I'm continuing to deploy more flaps. Goes into a steeper approach. I'm also going to hit shift / which will arm the speed brake. Might have seen it light up here when I did that. Okay, so we seem to be doing quite well horizontally and vertically according to the indicators. We're holding 180 knots and we're descending at about the correct rate. The PAPI is showing both red and white lights, so everything's looking good at the moment. As before, if you've noticed from any of my other videos, before we touch down we'll need to disengage the auto throttle and turn off the autopilot. If we don't do that, it will speed up and try and take off again, and that's the very last thing we need. We need to be able to touch down here and get the spoilers to deploy and apply the brakes because the runway here is so short. So just a quick recap: before we touch down, turn off the auto throttle and turn off the autopilot. Other than that, leave the autopilot and the ILS to do its thing. According to the PAPI, we're a little high, which seems to be the safer option. Off with the auto throttle, off with the autopilot, cut the engines, and just before we touch down try and flare a little. There we go, and apply the brakes. Not the smoothest landing you ever saw in your life, but hopefully it's safe and we'll be able to stop before we run out of runway.
Boeing 37 X-ray, turn next taxiway.
Seems to have worked quite well. Use a little bit of throttle to get us towards the end of the runway. So that I can exit safely.
Boeing 37 X-ray, turn next taxiway.
As usual,
Boeing 37 X-ray, contact ground on
air traffic helpful
110.8.
after the fact. What I'll do though is I'll park the aircraft here and just for fun we'll take a look at how that landing looked to air traffic. So we'll do an instant replay of 100 seconds, ought to do it, and we'll cycle through until we get the view from air traffic. I'm sure we'll see that this was a little bit on the bumpy side, but nevertheless safe. We managed to get down and safely off the runway, the correct way rather than running out of runway and rolling off the end. And there we are. So that's it. Thanks very much for watching. This has been a video showing how to do a takeoff, use autopilot, ILS and land the standard Boeing 737-800 with Flight Simulator X.